The Housewright Symposium on the Future of Music Education was held in Tallahassee, Florida between September 26 and September 29, 1999. At what many music educators look back on as a turning point in the field, inspired by lofty motives and propelled by the turn of the century, 12 statements were made that sought to guide past, present, and future educators into the classroom of the future. These statements combined would form what we know of today as simply the Housewright Declaration. Before we can even get into the Housewright Declaration, we should cover some more major events that took place in the field leading up to this event here. In 1947, the Music Educators National Conference published the Music Education Source Book. This was a summative report of 4 documents created through 4 years of intense examination of the field of education between 1942 and 1946, and would go on to inspire the MENC to adopt a declaration of faith, purpose, and action. The purpose being widening horizons for music education for years to come. 20 years later, the Tanglewood Symposium took place in Tanglewood, Massachusetts. A similar instance took place where scholars from multiple disciplines convened to make yet another declaration. After deliberations and recommendations from the body in attendance, a, quote, philosophical guide for reform in music education was created, along with, quote, foundation and inspiration for curricular and policy initiatives. Known as the Tanglewood Declaration, this, alongside movements such as Widening Horizons, would help kickstart the leaders who would go on to organize the Housewright Symposium. And so, the Housewright Symposium happens, and music educators are left with 12 conditions/agreements that answer philosophical questions and provide guidelines for the 21st century music classroom. They are as follows. Now, with the declaration of these 12 statements, the symposium concluded and the field of music education had been propelled into the future, and it was happily ever after. We solved music education. But that symposium happened 22 years ago. Where are we at now? Marie McCarthy attempts to answer this question with her article, The Housewright Declaration, A Lens for Viewing Music Education in the Early 21st Century. It's a great article, I recommend you give it a read. With the luxury of observing 20 years between the symposium and when McCarthy published her article, she applied each of these statements within the context of the current-day music classroom. She divided 10 of the 12 statements into 2 groups of themes, leaving out Statement 2, as it serves as foundation for the other statements in the list, and Statement 12, which calls educators to act on all of the other statements. Think of it as the all of the above option here. The first group is about inclusion, and it includes Statements 1, 4, 9, and 11. The second group, Widening Horizons, consists of statements 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. The theme of inclusion is incredibly important to distinguish here. Living in today's society, we continue to see and experience microaggressions, transgressions, and harassment happen in many places, definitely not excluding the music classroom. The idea that every student deserves an opportunity to thrive in a music classroom setting feels obvious. But not every educator that exists today was taught to think that way. And with this declaration, a focus to make sure that educators were teaching everybody for everybody was realized. Now educators are much better equipped to teach classes consisting of children from multiple backgrounds. They confront socioeconomic barriers, gender nonconformity, students with special needs, and differences in races, not as if they aren't present, but acknowledging it as a real issue and yet still not allowing it to hinder their experience in the music classroom.
The group of inclusion also accounts for the inclusion of all music. Western music has been the ultimate resource for how students, especially in the United States, learn and perform music, so much so that we've categorized all music as such. There is Western music, and then there is world music, or non-Western music. It's a much better alternative to other, or even sometimes primitive music, but it's still evident that we have quite a ways to go. As someone who has participated in a band program in some capacity for the better part of 12 years, it's a real shame that the first time I played music composed by anyone who wasn't a white male, to my knowledge, was in my 3rd year of college. Even 10 years after the symposium had taken place, none of the music that I played when I was in high school felt affected by anything that was said in this declaration. In the years following the symposium, music educators faced many impactful policies that affected how not only their students would be assessed, see stuff like No Child Left Behind, standardized testing, but how educators themselves would be assessed as well. We see this evident with the release of the National Core Arts Standards in 2014. More efforts were made to increase the number of things to do in a music classroom. Multiple measures directly impacted this increase, such as the introduction and integration of technology in the classroom. iPads and other electronic devices had the capability to allow students to create music in a tactile and very accessible way. The introduction of different styles of music, such as jazz, gamelan, and other traditions from around the world, provided a much richer experience for students and allowed teachers to branch off and potentially showcase some of their own passions in the classroom in a way that may have not been possible in years prior. The music industry is now a much bigger force in the classroom than it has ever been. You'll see sponsors that aren't just instrument makers and publishers at large music education conferences. And all of this great stuff can be attributed to the call to action laid out in the Housewright Declaration, as now the potential duties of the music educator have expanded beyond just the instruction of music. Now, as I alluded to earlier, there were and still are obvious struggles that affect the total implementation of the mentioned statements, and McCarthy does a great job at acknowledging those. One of the biggest halters of progress that I've personally experienced is the break from tradition, and McCarthy highlights this. Too often are older educators in the field unwilling to adapt to the ever-changing world of music, let alone music education. The unwillingness to break from tradition leads to the acceptance of homogeneity and stagnation. In the field of education itself, it's incredibly hard to deviate from the status quo. But music is one of the few fields that standardization and uniformity does not seem to benefit whatsoever. And all of the above can explain why there's still a prominent sense and practice of racism within the field. I attend a school of music where this problem continues to exist. It has always existed in this school and will likely continue to exist if something is not done and our higher-ups don't hold themselves accountable like we've been urging them to do. To see close friends of mine be commented on in a racist way and made to feel less than other students has absolutely killed my drive at points. Why would I want to continue in a field where people like this are the ones I'm supposed to learn under? In this institution and many other institutions today, a white person who complains about the School of Music is genuinely concerned about the well-being of both the institution and its students. But yet a person of color who complains about the school doesn't know how lucky they have it and should just be grateful they're there in the first place. So, to end on a lighter note, it is evident to see how this declaration has changed the scope of music education. And McCarthy does a great job illuminating all the desires and goals while also acknowledging the struggle to implement the sentiments proclaimed in these 12 statements. We still have quite a ways to go to achieve fully what the declaration laid out, and I can only enter this field with an immense sense of hope, knowing that myself and those around me can positively impact the field forever. We need more articles like the one McCarthy wrote. Keeping ourselves aware and accountable is the single most important thing music educators can do to begin to make change and progress into the future. And that's all I have to say. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. We'll see if this turns into a regular thing.